Animal killers!
For 6 years, and with almost military precision, this was a sustained campaign of fear and intimidation.
This is what you do! This is what you do!
The aim was the closure of the Huntingdon Life Sciences animal testing labs in Cambridgeshire, but the targets were anybody who did business with Huntingdon.
We'll be back for you! All of you! We know where you all live, you scum!
It was international in its scale, like here at GlaxoSmithKline in Sweden, just one of many companies singled out for direct action.
Shame on you, animal killers! We're coming for you!
We received a hoax parcel bomb. We've had graffiti painted on cars. We've had fireworks set off over the house late at night.
Threats, vendettas and violence.
Ultimately, the extremism, it went as far as physical assaults. Myself and one of my fellow directors were personally physically assaulted at our homes. People could have lost their lives.
And the activists determined to win.
Uncomfortable. That's what it needs to become. Uncomfortable.
Huntingdon Life Sciences believe intimidation from animal rights activists deterred British investors.
Police believe thousands of companies and individuals may have been targeted in the Huntingdon Life Sciences closure campaign, but animal rights activists have little sympathy. Their suffering, they say, is nothing in comparison to that of the animals in Huntingdon's labs.
Over the past 5 years, this place has also been the target of a concerted campaign by animal rights activists who are determined to close it down.
Hi, and welcome back to Animal Liberation TV. So, now I'm back on recording films, doing the uploads. I'm going back to the series Spotlight on Vivisection, which is completely relevant given that there's the ongoing NBR campaign at the moment, the Free the NBR Beagles campaign, the Barry 20th anniversary demo and day of action, which is all connected to Huntingdon and Covance and NBR Beagles. So it's all really kind of interlinked with everything that's going on right now, because the ultimate target from the NBR Beagles is Covance Labs, the biggest contract testing labs in the world. So on Spotlight of Vivisection, I want to call this episode The Success of SHAC. Okay, and the first thing I want to say is that the tactics that I'm going to talk about, the things that are coming up in this, weren't new. I've said this before in some of my other videos. They weren't new to the movement. SHAC just adopted and adapted strategies and tactics that had been going on before in the late 90s.
Huntingdon Life Sciences. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy after its key investors were targeted by protesters opposed to experiments on animals.
The home visits, the pressure campaigning, the constant demos outside people's businesses and homes.
Slaughter! Pulling the water! Dropping off the animal slaughter! Pulling the water! Dropping off the animal slaughter! There's no excuse! For animal abuse! There's no excuse! For animal abuse! Kevin Bear, there's no excuse! For animal abuse! Kevin Bear, there's no excuse! For animal abuse! Kevin Bear!
people, the secondary and tertiary targets, the financial support, the things like that. That was going on before SHAC was formed. But I do want to talk about the success of SHAC, which was built on the few years of the movement before, and supported by a network of local groups. So what I want to do is read out this big article about the SHAC campaign against Huntingdon Life Sciences, now Covance, now called Covance. And I think this article, I haven't read it recently. I didn't read this in preparation for this episode because I wanted it to be kind of quite fresh for me. And I'll probably give a few little comments or things, or bits of opinion or experience or whatever, as I'm reading this out. And I've got quite a bit of footage that I'm going to probably mingle in with the stuff I'm saying as well. So here we go. This is the Independent on the 22nd of June 2000. Oh yeah, you can see my nice new ACAB tattoo. Well, I got it a few months ago, but it's the most recent one I've got. 22nd of June 2000, Thursday review. The Siege of Huntingdon. Activists have been waging a war on Europe's biggest animal research lab for 8 months. Their weapons are hate, paint, spit, and intimidation. But now they've discovered how to hit Huntingdon Life Sciences where it really hurts, in the pocket. It's a tactic that's paying instant dividends and threatens to bring animal testing in Britain to its knees. I mean, that's how serious it was. The government had to step in and bring in new laws and look up all the activists. Heather from the SHAC campaign got 11 years.
There have been allegations of intimidation against workers at the company, but the protesters say most of those involved are peaceful.
We are entirely committed to peaceful campaigning, and the reason we're standing here in the freezing cold, all of us here, is because we want a more just, a more peaceful, a less violent world. That's why we're here. I think we've shown overall enormous restraint.
The government says it won't allow protesters to close down the industry.
We had this very naked attempt to shut down this company by intimidation and harassment. And I think there's a new resolve by the pharmaceutical companies, other contract research organisations, and indeed the government to stop this sort of thing happening.
So the Siege of Huntingdon, let's have a little closer look. And we've got people protesting with some, toy police next to them. What have we got there? Some coppers trying to take people's details down probably and harassing protesters. More protesters. Someone holding a sign. And then what's on the other side here? There's something at the bottom. Someone with a van. Ooh, it's all back to front, of course. Goes down Huntingdon Life Sciences torture and death camp. The woman's voice is hysterical, shrill and relentless. It reverberates across the laboratory compound from beyond the fortified gates. "What kind of perverts are you?" she screams through her megaphone. "Keeping animals in tiny filthy cages, slitting their throats. Shame on you, shame on you." That sounds about right. Sounds like typical sort of demo stuff, doesn't it?
Vivisection is the lie! How many animals have to die? Vivisection is the trick! They make money and we get sick! Vivisection is the trick! They make money and we get sick! Vivisection lies in death! Free the animals, ALF! Vivisection lies in death! Free the animals, ALF! Vivisection lies in death! Free the animals, ALF!
woman continues this amplified abuse until she has exhausted herself. When she can shout no more, her companions, a ragged bunch including a grandmother of 6, a young man with studs through his cheeks, and a girl called Catherine, who tells me that she tempts so that she can devote time to the cause, take their turn at the megaphone. The tirade began before lunchtime and continues all afternoon until the 760 employees at HLS, Huntingdon Life Sciences, Europe's largest contract animal research laboratory, now the biggest in the world, leave work at 5. For the workers, it's an awful way to end the day. Oh no, oh, poor workers. First they must drive through the high security fences and then layers of hooped razor wire, past the steel observation tower and the patrolling Alsatian dogs to reach the public highway. Then they must suffer. I mean, you know, they work in a lab, it's high security. Then they must suffer the daily barrage of abuse. What, for being animal abusing scum? That's not really abuse, is it? It's just the truth. The guard at the gate warns anyone who forgets to wind up their car windows that the animal rights protesters tend to spit. I've never actually seen that, to be honest with you. And I've been on one fucking hell of a lot of HLS demos. I've stood out their gates for hours, days probably added up. As the workers leave in their cars, the protesters' drums start to beat, ooh, and the whistles trill. Pure evil, screams the lad with the studs. Well, that's right, again, it's just the truth. As he shoves a poster graphically depicting the horrors of vivisection into the path of passing cars. Like others on the demonstration, he dreams of storming laboratories and liberating the animals inside. Yeah, good on him and good on everyone who thinks that. That's the only natural response, isn't it? Save those poor creatures. He dreams too of a vicious revenge. Well, he's not alone on that either, is he? And it's clear that he would like to subject the jailers to the same torture the animals have suffered in the name of research. Well, you could say that's a fitting punishment. That's not for me to say.
This man is a director of a company with connections to a Huntingdon shareholder. But even with such distant links, he started receiving threats. Worse followed when a letter was sent to more than 200 neighbours claiming he was a convicted paedophile.
I was basically devastated because it's a major accusation. I've seen on the TV things that happened to people who are alleged to be paedophiles, gangs of people who basically turn up at the houses and threaten them. Clearly, I didn't know what was going to happen to me.
Imagine it's 3 a.m., you're at home, and you're confronted with this. These are animal rights extremists making what they call a home visit. And such attacks have risen dramatically, leaving their victims in terror, business in turmoil, and major drug companies threatening to leave Britain.
Huntingdon has been under siege like this for 8 months. Well, a lot longer than that, but this is when the SHAC campaign really ramped up what we were doing before. Since protesters turned their full fury on the Cambridgeshire Centre after their campaign closed Hillgrove Farm near Witney in Oxfordshire, which bred cats for scientific experimentation. That was a good victory, that one. I was there at quite a few things at Hillgrove. Since then, says Andrew Gay, Huntingdon's marketing director, surely one of the world's more difficult jobs. Yeah, I'd say so. Workers have suffered daily abuse, intimidation and even terrorism.
The protests were augmented by another, much more menacing element. This just one of a number of hoax bombs sent to offices and victims' homes. The group also sent used sanitary towels through the post, claiming they were infected with the AIDS virus. Cars were vandalised, houses spray-painted, and letters sent to their neighbours claiming they were paedophiles.
For some people, for some of the victims, this was a significant threat to their way of life. People really living under the fear of what may happen.
Employees receive regular letters and phone calls at home. The callers scream at them and warn them to leave Huntingdon or else. Veiled threats are made about their children. Ooh, veiled threats. Worse than threats are veiled threats. Protesters in balaclavas and wearing terrifying skull masks. Terrifying skull masks. I mean, come on. Kids wear skull masks all the time on Halloween, you know, trick-or-treating or whatever. Like, yeah, terrifying skull masks. I'll tell you what, she's not mentioned yet the terror that any of those flipping beagles go through, has she, at Covance? Or the primates, or all the other animals they've got in there. She's not mentioned that yet. Visit workers at home throwing bricks through their windows and alerting the neighbours to the fact they live next door to perverts and murderers. Quote, 6 weeks ago, the cars of 3 members were firebombed on the same night outside their own homes. Those employees have yet to return to work and all are in counselling.
Began with protests at our laboratories. People with placards disagreeing with what we did. That is legal protest. We have no problem with that. Unfortunately, it very quickly became personal.
It's our mission to finish you off, Huntingdon, and all you filthy, scummy workers!
Some supporters used extreme methods.
People receiving hate mail, people receiving telephone calls in the middle of the night. And then we saw fire bombings, literally 11 cars set on fire in front of their driveways. And ultimately, the extremism, it went as far as physical assaults. Myself and one of my fellow directors were personally physically assaulted at our homes. That was incredibly intimidating and frightening and very, very dangerous. You know, people could have lost their lives.
Andrew Gay insists that staff turnover is not high. Bullshit, it's always high there. They only employ muppets, like I've said many times before. Only a muppet gets a job in a contract testing lab, handling animals all day, poisoning them with fertilisers. No one in their right mind would do that job. You've got to be thick, no dreams, no empathy or love in your heart. You're basically just a muppet that's doing some minimum wage and bullshit job. You know, of course it's high turnover. The activists I spoke to claimed that local newspapers are always advertising jobs at the laboratories, which they were. So the situation at Huntingdon is very unpleasant. And not just for the animals. Oh, finally, the animals get mentioned. Wow. But the surprising thing is that it is not these familiar forms of intimidation which are crippling Huntingdon. Rather, it is a new strategy employed by the activists which focuses on company finances, and that may yet close it. And according to Andrew Gay, it could eventually chase the testing of pharmaceutical products from these shores entirely, with disastrous consequences for the wider pharmaceutical industry. That is the key point. If we close Covance down, we pretty much boot animal testing out of the UK. That's how big Covance is. And even they're saying it. Tony Blair and Lord Sainsbury said it in their speeches in the noughties when they clamped down on SHAC and brought all the new laws in, the Serious Organised Crime Act affecting animal research to protect it.
Very recently, even the Queen has announced new legislation, yet more powers to the police to deal with the so-called threat of animal rights activists.
Good evening. 2 months ago, some of the world's biggest drug companies gave the government a stark choice. Crack down on animal rights extremists, or we'll move our factories and research bases out of the United Kingdom.
This campaign is not just having an impact on Huntingdon and causing us damage, it's actually causing economic damage to the whole pharmaceutical industry, who've made it clear that the UK will suffer unless these animal rights extremists are truly brought under control.
But those who support the research carried out by Huntingdon Life Sciences say its closure would have a devastating effect on the country's drugs industry.
The pharmaceutical industry in Britain depends on toxicology testing of its products, particularly by Huntingdon. And I think that there is a possibility that there would be a gradual, perhaps even a rapid, hemorrhage of the pharmaceutical companies out of this country.
Yes, that's how big closing Covance is. You want to get rid of VIVISECTION in the UK? Get rid of Covance. You get rid of VIVISECTION in the UK, you send a message to animal abuse of all sorts. The investment isn't worth it, the hassle isn't worth it, the protests aren't worth it, the pressure, the publicity of you doing dodgy, dirty things to animals for money. All of the animal industries would suffer if VIVISECTION got booted out of the UK. And Covance If we smashed Covance and got rid of them out of the UK, then we're basically going to win the vivisection battle. And like I said, in turn, the ramifications on that on all animal abuse. And Barry Horner said exactly the same sentiments. There's a quote somewhere where he says something like, a victory against vivisection wouldn't be a victory alone. It would affect all animal abuse industries, and that's right. I agree. You know, others might not, but anyway. Huntingdon is the largest company to be targeted by animal rights activists so far, which it was. We closed down quite a lot of smaller businesses, but nothing this big. It is also the first to be listed on the London Stock Exchange, and it is that has opened up a new world of possibilities to the Stop Huntingdon Animal Cruelty campaign, SHAC, which distances itself from the most extreme behaviour of supporters, is now waging a concerted financial offensive not just against Huntingdon, but the financial institutions necessary to its survival.
SHAC protest groups were set up in the US and Europe. Its campaign had gone global.
Try the FBI! Try police meetings! We don't care! We're never going away, and we always win!
Unfortunately, once the attacks on the financial community began, they began to distance themselves from us. Pretty quickly, it was impossible for us to get a bank account in this country or insurance coverage in this country. And unfortunately, we lost a lot of shareholders as well.
In truth, Huntingdon has never fully recovered from the crisis that engulfed it in 1997, when Channel 4 secretly filmed two of its workers viciously shaking and punching a sad-faced, helpless beagle, which if you watch my spotlight on Vivisection 1, that's it, that, and also full sort of 3 minutes of it from the US and UK in From Dusk Till Dawn, episode 1.
Huntingdon Life Sciences is a multinational company with laboratories in Britain and the United States. In 1997, 2 of its lab workers were sacked and prosecuted for animal cruelty after a television expose. And the publicity that followed sparked a new protest group into action, Stop Huntingdon Animal Cruelty, or SHAC.
The company's share price plummeted, and the government threatened to close it down. Valued at $335 million in 1990, Huntingdon is now worth only around $16 million. I mean, this is back then, it's really big now. It's big business again. They've recovered from the damage we did first time. But until the activists descended last year, the company did appear to have cleaned up its image. In his office, Andrew Gay catalogues recent financial attacks which have once again set the share price falling. On the phone, Gay had earlier summed up in the last 8 months as a joy. Yeah, right. He must have been stressed, constantly stressed. But in the flesh, he seems irritated, beleaguered, and perhaps a little alone. Yeah, and he's also featured in, I think it's the UK spotlight I did. I think it might be 6, where there's a bit on Heather doing stalls, and then he's the guy that's commenting in his office. I mean, just look at his face. If you watch that again, that's the guy that's giving these quotes here. He was like one of the CEOs. He's sinister. He's got weird, sinister eyes and lips and movements. And then he has to remind himself at one point, looking into the corner of his eyes, about how to say medical research they do when that's bullshit. And he forgets and goes, medical research. He's sinister bastard, he is. Anyway. Right, I'll try not to interrupt too much. That's not surprising, for the city seems to be deserting Huntingdon. In February, the fund manager Phillips and Drew offloaded an 11% stake in the company. Shares worth 10p tumbled to a penny. Then earlier this month, Huntingdon's broker West LB Panmure resigned, and now there are very strong rumours that the Royal Bank of Scotland is considering not renewing Huntingdon's £24 million overdraft. I mean, they were in such shit. It was just constant good news about them for quite a few years. They were really fucked.
They are among hundreds of businesses facing violence and intimidation because of their involvement in animal testing.
The Royal Bank of Scotland had been targeted by animal rights activists on the run-up to the repayment deadline. Employees and shareholders of Huntingdon Life Sciences also faced intimidation.
The companies have been coy about their reasons for breaking with Huntingdon. Yeah, right. We all know why they left. But there is no doubt that the pressure from animal rights activists has influenced events. Yeah. Gay says Phillips and Drew was attacked on many fronts. In January, a SHAC campaign sheet entitled Blood Money claims the fund manager was ultimately responsible for the fate of the animals at Huntingdon, which is true. Then companies who entrust pension funds to Phillips and Drew were targeted individually, which led to protests outside plants belonging to companies including Rover, as well as several local councils. Then came the embarrassing revelation that the Labour Party, recipient of a £1 million pre-election donation from the political animal lobby, had pensions with Phillips and Drew and, by implication, in Huntingdon. Well, the Labour Party, they're the lot that betrayed us and Barry, didn't they? Tony Blair. Along with the protests came the intimidation. There were bomb hoaxes at Phillips and Drew's headquarters in the city, and the directors of UBS UK Holding, Philip and Drew's parent company, discovered their names and addresses in a SHAC newsletter. They had those obscene phone calls and unwelcome home visits to look forward to. The broker West LB Panmure was subject to the same treatment. Protesters invaded one of its large corporate events in London. Then its directors' names and addresses were published in a newsletter and threats were made to their families. Now individual shareholders are on the rack. Last week 1,500 had their names and addresses printed on the SHAC website, each a possible focus for the anger of local animal rights groups in Britain.
In the past 18 months, Huntingdon and other companies have obtained injunctions against SHAC to restrict the home and office protests. But in that period, extremist attacks have more than doubled, and dozens of firms have stopped doing business with Huntingdon. In September, an information technology firm told SHAC it had severed its links. We understand it took the decision after 2 directors found explosive devices under their cars.
I'm CNBC Pharmaceuticals reporter Mike Huckman at the breaking news desk, and on an animal rights activist website, a group called MFAH Austria, that stands for Militant Forces Against Huntingdon, referring to an animal lab testing company located in the UK and here in New Jersey, is claiming responsibility now for the recent attacks on Swiss drug maker Novartis and its CEO, Dr. Daniel Vasella. The website also anonymously posting this photo of the presumably fire-damaged vacation home of Dr. Vasella. A company spokesperson telling CNBC this appears to be his home, but they cannot be sure. Dr. Vasella, by the way, says he's going to sell the property so as not to trouble the town residents any further. Separately, in its responsibility claim, the MFAH group writes on the website, and this is directed at Dr. Vasella, understand this. This will continue until you sever ties with Huntingdon Life Sciences. We will attack your private life wherever possible. We will destroy your life. Novartis insists that it no longer does business with Huntingdon Life Sciences and hasn't done so for quite some time. It believes the attacks on individuals like Vasella are having a chilling effect on crucial research.
Scientists who have been well funded in this country by the National Institutes of Health have decided to walk away from research because they don't feel that they can protect their families. And in addition to that, young researchers are choosing careers that don't involve biomedical research because who needs this?
In the face of this onslaught, Gay has opted for more openness. He facilitates visits for journalists like me to see the beagles and the monkeys, trips which, of course, are dismissed by activists as a whitewash of the horrors really taking place in the lab. Yeah. Indeed, all the animals I'm taken to see look healthy, well and looked after. Yeah, right. Just showing you the new ones or whatever. Still, it's not hard to feel sorry, even if you believe that animal testing is a necessary evil for dogs bred for experimentation. So even she's agreeing that they shouldn't be there, basically. Kept caged for most of their lives, well, all sort of 4 months, like 8 months, whatever they get. For most of their lives and killed when the testing is over. As Gay puts it, autopsy is the most important part of the experiment. Later, at an anonymous terraced house in Cambridge belonging to an old lady who has campaigned against animal testing for years. That's going to be Joan Court from Cambridge, who passed away recently, but she was, I mean, I've been to meetings around her house in Cambridge and saw her on loads of stuff in the 90s, and she was fairly elderly then, but she passed away sort of a few years ago, I think it was, but that'll be Joan Court, legend. The official tour is countered by SHAC activist Les Stevens. So during the camp we had outside HLS, opposite their main gates, we had a protest camp for a few weeks, and we had dug a tunnel and things like that. And me and Les actually, we sort of helped run the Huntingdon Death Sciences campaign, which was the campaign against HLS Covance before SHAC was formed in '99. So we stepped in when they had that problem, the programme that was mentioned before in '97, which made the share price plummet and government withdraw their licence for a bit. We formed the Huntingdon Death Sciences campaign and really tried to get the boot in while they were down, and we targeted secondary and tertiary targets like people who had shares and stuff. And then SHAC took over in '99. But me and Les helped dig that tunnel in the protest camp together, actually. Anyway, where am I? So he presses his remote control. Video nasty time. As an aging cat lolls on the sofa, the famous film of Huntingdon's abused beagle rolls. A film made in Huntingdon's American laboratories around the same time by undercover activist Michelle Rock shows similarly callous treatment of animals. The monkeys in her film scream and struggle as they undergo gavage, being dosed with a new nasal spray via a tube through their nose. Like the world needs another nasal decongestion, says Rock bitterly. Oh, she has got a point, hasn't she? But although smuggled films have their impact, it is SHAC's new tactics that are hitting companies in their pockets where it really hurts. Les Stevens says that the campaigners are not city slickers and are only gradually discovering all that is possible on the financial front. Yeah, we were learning as we went along during that period, really. Fellow activist Greg Avery agrees. We are on a steep learning curve, he says, and he adds that what they don't know, they can find out from a network of city sympathisers. UK activists set precedents for the rest of the world, says Rock, and others emulate what is happening here. Well, we like to think that's true. Us UK activists like to think that we're the pioneers. You know. Perhaps that alone ought to be enough to worry the global pharmaceutical industry. And Andrew Gay certainly argues that if SHAC's tactics succeed at Huntingdon, it will be Britain's fledgling biotech companies next. Too right it will be. And then the pharmaceutical giants themselves, which will feel the pressure. Yeah. We're not going to leave anyone out. If you're abusing animals, you're getting it. Privately, Huntingdon's directors are angry at their speedy desertion by city firms and at the two-faced attitude of government which demands that new medicines be adequately tested. Yeah, on dogs. That's not adequately testing sweet FA, is it? Yeah. The public would expect nothing less. I reckon if you put it to the public that they're testing fertilisers on beagle puppies, I think we know what the public would say. It's always prickly, like new medicines. They're not doing new medicines, it's fertilisers. Some medicines are tested through there, yeah. I mean, everything is. You know, so the medicines are as well. They don't do research developing medicines, they just check to see if they're safe or poisonous by putting them into rats or dogs or monkeys. You know, how's that going to tell us what's good for us? You don't go to a vet to get your flipping treatment if you've got tonsillitis, do you, idiots? Anyway. The public would expect nothing less, but that never makes that clear. Forcibly and in public, leaving Huntingdon to take the flak.
Do you have any reason to believe that that may have been intimidation or any kind of threat or any of the other things which you are now so used to?
I think there's a lot of conjecture around this because the threats that have been made quite overtly, I think, by various animal rights groups. From our perspective, you know, we have nothing very specific from the exchange to say that that is the reason, but I'm sure that behind it there must be some validity in that story.
Gay think it's time the industry got together and met the anti-vivisectionist arguments head on. We've been open to debate for ages. We're the people calling for a royal commission. We're the people asking for an open, honest and public inquiry into the whys and wherefores of what goes on in these labs. We're the people. I mean, I'm not particularly up for debate. There's no debate about it. Do you know what I mean? Set the animals free. There's no debate, really. you know. But they're the ones that don't want any investigation and have been like, whoa, a royal commission into vivisection. No, because they know even though it'd be a whitewash, they couldn't possibly come up with an explanation for what Covance does, like testing fertiliser on beagle puppies to make money. It's outrageous. It's some sort of moral loophole in society. Difficulty is that many companies are too worried about widespread public distaste for testing to go on the offensive. Exactly, proving my point. They can't win. How easy game uses his job would be if he were employed by the other side. Their blatant emotional propaganda is easy to pump out, he says. Blatant emotional propaganda. I mean, like, it's an emotional subject, thinking about young, innocent, cute beagle puppies being force injected or shoved up there everywhere with fertilisers and agrochemicals. I mean, yeah, that is emotional because it's wrong. It falls on the bad side of things to do. You know, society is nothing if we don't have moral fibre through it. You know, and that starts with the animals. Emotional propaganda. And the other thing is we give the facts out. We give the facts out, like, you know, it's mostly agrochemicals. You're poisoning beagle puppies till they die, you know, or you kill them and then you kill them. And he's the one saying it's medical research, so he's the one lying. They're always such two-faced twats. The Biotechnology Industries Association, BIA, which represents 100 new biotech companies, is particularly concerned by Huntingdon's predicament. You see, that's the impact we have by targeting Covance. Most of its members have yet to bring products to the market and need the city for vital research and development funds. Once developed, their products will also have to be animal tested by law. It makes them particularly vulnerable, said a BIA spokesman. Well, you'll have to change how you do things, won't you? If the animal testing isn't around, you'll have to develop your shitty thing somewhere else. And hopefully, by kind of getting rid of vivisection, we get rid of all this false avenue that we're going down for medicine, because vivisection takes us down a dead end. It's just kind of money-making formalities these drug companies are going through to basically get new stuff on the market, new chemicals to poison us with, whilst treating us. The whole pharmaceutical approach to health, you know, we need a holistic, grounded, more natural approach to health and preventative. And we don't need things like fertilisers and agrochemicals, so we don't need to test the safety of that. So that's 60% of what Covance does. So goodbye, Covance. You're not needed. Your stuff is not needed by society. The association has written to West LB Panmure criticising it for not standing firm. Well, it's not their business. See, that's the thing about targeting secondary and tertiary people who are just financial institutions. They don't want to be tarnished with being linked to animal research. They don't make any money from animal research. It's just one investment or whatever for them. It's just one business thing. They can shove their business into something else. I don't know, what, coal or clothes or something, you know. They can put their money into other things. They don't have to be involved in animal research. The lab makes its money from the research. These other companies, if you pressure them, who support Covance through finances or shares, whatever, they'll get rid of their links to Covance because it's bad business for them and they don't make money from it particularly. So if we target these people surrounding and supporting Covance, we get rid of Covance.
Distressed, astonished, speechless, the reaction of the head of Huntingdon Life Sciences after its long-planned share flotation on the New York Stock Exchange was put on hold without explanation with just 45 minutes to go. Based in Britain, HLS has become well known as the target of anti-vivisection campaigners. Now Channel 4 News has learned that animal rights activists organised a massive telephone bombardment of Wall Street just hours before the flotation was due to happen.
Well, obviously, we're exceedingly disappointed, distressed, astonished. We were absolutely speechless when we were told the news. You know, literally, we looked at each other not really believing it.
Already there's one senator who's come forward saying, you know, to the stock exchange they shouldn't give in to animal rights threats, or at least implying that much. But this would be a very considerable scalp for the animal rights people if you fail eventually to float.
The government's now responded, promising new laws to prevent harassment and threats against research scientists. But as we have discovered, those tactics have become frighteningly common.
This is a highly unusual decision. Normally it's utilised only when there's financial irregularity or when there's a problem with a director or a major shareholder. So for this to happen at the very last minute, I can only assume it's because of threats made by animal rights extremists.
Huntingdon Life Sciences are furious. Its chief executive, Brian Cass, no stranger to controversy, hit by a baseball bat allegedly by a protester a few years ago. The tactics used against his company, the targeting of anyone connected with it, however tenuously, famous in the UK, and now perhaps exported abroad very publicly. Channel 4 News contacted WAR, or Win Animal Rights, a New York-based anti-vivisection group. They told us they had sent out an email just a few hours before Huntingdon was due to start trading to 10,000 activists, telling them to target the stock exchange. They have made themselves a primary focal point of this campaign, it said. Please write polite letters and emails and make polite phone calls to let them know what you think of their decision. Brian Cass will be on Wall Street for the day, but WAR will be there every day after that. The stock exchange refused to answer our questions as to why it had acted so hastily, only confirming the flotation had been postponed.
It was our goal to make sure that every investor and every stockbroker on Wall Street knew what Huntingdon Life Sciences did behind their locked gates and razor-wire fences. There's no telling how many people actually hit the phones on the morning that they were supposed to open.
The association is also lobbying the government to change the law to allow vulnerable company directors to withhold their addresses from company accounts. Animal terrorism is the #1 threat to them, the directors in the UK at the moment, said the spokesman. But because the tactics are new, most companies have not yet thought about it properly yet. But Greg Avery doubts that any of that matters. The financial institutions are looking at Huntingdon and seeing it is not worth the hassle, which is what I just said.
When a mystery financial backer from the United States stepped in, activists say the battle is far from over.
What we will do is we will track whoever it is in America and we will financially destroy them, as we have slowly but surely financially destroyed Huntingdon Life Sciences.
We at Huntingdon, quite honestly, are used to dealing with adversity and to being resilient. I think the real questions now turn to the New York Stock Exchange as to why have they done this, what really brought it about, was it because of pressures, could it actually happen to other companies, will it happen to the other companies that are in our industry who are presently quoted on that exchange, will it happen to companies that are involved in armaments or smoking or tobacco or spirit or whatever it may be. You know, is this just the tip of the iceberg as regards the potential for the New York Stock Exchange to be affected by extremist pressure?
SHAC was also extending its official campaign. Those who invested in or did business with Huntingdon were seen as legitimate targets.
The company you work for is the internet service provider for Huntingdon Life Sciences.
Protesters are not convinced. News that the company has been bailed out by an anonymous backer has caused outrage. Campaigners have now vowed to continue and intensify their protest.
Well, today, hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside one premises in Suffolk. 3 protesters were arrested, with campaigners accusing police of heavy-handedness.
The animal rights campaigners may have lost their battle to close Huntingdon Life Sciences, but they show no sign of scaling down their protest.
This is the reality of what is
The
going
police
on.
were out in large numbers to contain a demonstration at the company's second laboratory in Suffolk, and they took a tough line.
You torture 500 animals a day. Nothing gets out of this company alive, and you are going out of business.
One man was arrested for using a megaphone. Officers said he was being abusive and took him away to a local police station.
The protesters may have failed in their bid to have HLS closed down when an anonymous American backer stepped in at the last minute to save the company. but they say they are determined their campaign will go on.
Activists have said they'll find out who the backer is and, in their words, teach them a lesson.
I'm sure our colleagues in America will find out who they are, but the campaign will be stepped up against vivisection generally in this country. We're in this for the long haul. We're not going to go away.
The financial worries of Huntingdon Life Sciences may have gone away, but it's unlikely the protesters will too. The company says there are wider issues at stake, and only firm action from the government will save Britain's pharmaceutical industry.
Will the city develop backbone? No, he predicts. It's only interested in profit. It would sell its granny for £1. Quite frankly, they are realising that there are easier places to invest money. Huntingdon will close, Avery says emphatically. It's now only a question of time. And the pharmaceutical giants, their time will come. So all of that, in my opinion, still stands true now. I hope you got a little bit of an insight with this episode of the SHAC campaign and things that are successful and things that aren't so successful or whatever. Anyway, hope you learnt something from the history of the movement. As always, I hope it's getting you thinking. Thanks for watching. Take care.
His job? Delivering guinea pigs to animal testing laboratories. He's had to turn his home into a fortress to protect him and his young family from the extremists. His CCTV cameras captured one attack on his van outside his home earlier this year. On another occasion, the alarms were set off after 2 plastic containers were left on his doorstep.
What was life like in jail, and then what is it like now since you've gotten out?
Being incarcerated for me was a difficult experience, not in terms of the actual conditions. I tried to keep in mind in terms of the actual conditions. Even incarcerated in this country, you have it better than a lot of people in the world. I still had clean water. I still had access to health care, something I actually don't have on the outside. I had access to health care. I had 3 meals a day. I had a roof over my head. That's more than a good amount of people in this world have. So I've resisted the temptation to pity myself.
They've been intimidated as they arrive, their vehicles attacked, their homes attacked, their vehicles set on fire in their driveway, their lives put at risk. These are, very serious extremists that we're talking about.
Indeed, anyone with the remotest link to this establishment has been put on the list of target firms. It's a tactic with a simple aim: to put so much pressure on them that they'll sever their links and close this place down once and for all.
backbeater. And some of them say them a black star bar. And some of them say them a cocky basha. Fascists on your top, nobody worry about that. Fascists on your top, we will fight them back. Fascists on your top, then we will counter attack. Fascists on your